Talking Tuesday is always great, but it is even better after the season opener when we finally have something new to talk about on the podcast daily. That is Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. We will be back in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center to talk to Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, and Will Howard later on today, which is Tuesday, right after Ohio State beat Akron 52-6 on Saturday. Bill, you weren't in a post-game press conference. It was very hot up there, by the way. You probably were better off not being there. So you haven't got to fire off any questions yet. When you get into the Woody later on, what's the first thing on your mind?
The first thing on my mind, I suppose, is offensive line stuff, right? I don't know. My immediate reaction was probably a little stronger than it would be now, going into a Tuesday after rewatching a little bit and just kind of taking some time to sort of process the entire weekend of college football. I didn't think the first half for Ohio State's offensive line was all that good. But the second half was pretty good. I thought the second half looked more or less how you want it to look. And there were movements in the first half too that things were synced up pretty well. I thought a couple of those runs looked good. So I want to kind of take the temperature of Ryan Day and Chip Kelly where they are on that. I think there are two things. One, it's understandable that any offensive line might be working through some kinks in the first game. And I think that's especially true of an offensive line that has to take out a starting left guard and put in a guy who's never played before and is playing a first-time right guard and is playing a center who's at least playing for this team for the first time. So you created an offensive line where no one had played next to the guy playing next to him in a game before. So it should take time to come together. But I also thought there was some stuff that felt a little bit like last year when it came to running the ball, which I was hopeful, I guess, wouldn't have been eliminated entirely because nobody's perfect, but maybe that would have been behind them in a more significant way. So I think general sort of offensive line evaluation, how much not having their normal five impacted those things and whether or not they feel like they have enough time to get their normal five together and start building some momentum, looking ahead to teams like Michigan State and Iowa.
This is the first time that you and I have talked about what happened on Saturday. I'm curious what you think about this. I thought that Austin Saravel, maybe in the first half, I don't know about the duration of the game. I'm curious your thoughts about it. Like the Donovan Jackson part of it, to me, doesn't seem like it really explains a lot of the disjointed stuff because, yes, he's a senior. Yes, he may be one of their most valuable pieces. But if Austin Saravel was out there and I thought doing a pretty good job, it doesn't explain some of the issues they had by not having Donovan Jackson to me. I don't know if that makes sense, but I thought he played a very good game and just putting Donovan Jackson back in there maybe wouldn't solve all that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I thought Austin Saravel played pretty well too, actually. And I think really it only got super clunky, I thought, on a couple of drives in the first half. And it's when they took Tegra Shabola out and put Carson Hinsman in at right guard. And I'm not trying to say that Carson Hinsman was solely the problem there. I just maybe rotating on your offensive line in general just perhaps isn't the best idea if you can avoid it. So if they're not going to do that anymore, or if they're not going to do that, I guess as we get into some more impactful type of games, and I don't know that I'm super worried about it, but I agree with you that merely inserting Donovan Jackson back into the lineup does not fix all of what ailed the offensive line at times. It would help some, I think. I think it probably makes Josh Simmons more comfortable playing next to a guy who he's played next to. And then just having three pretty veteran guys from center out to the left side, I think would help too. But I did think that Austin Saravel acquitted himself fine for his first cleat to start. I was glad he got that experience because, like I said, he never played before, so he needs to get those reps under his belt. So no matter what happened, it would have been good for him. But I think he did play okay.
It's interesting. Austin played all 70 offensive snaps. I mean, he's the only guy that did play every offensive snap. And you wonder, is it that hard to rotate or to bring in a different guy to play left guard, or to instead of having him in there the whole time, if he's not really who we think of as, he's not in the conversation as the starter at right guard, right? So it's like Donovan, it's Tegra and it's Carson Hinsman. So would it have been impossible to put Carson Hinsman at left guard to let him get more reps? Would it have been difficult to move Tegra to left guard and keep Carson at right? I just don't know how that works. But I thought that the offensive line, especially in the first half, I mean, they were pretty bad, I think, in the first half, to be honest. I just didn't see the push, the get off, the the fire that I was really looking for heading into this game, which is always frustrating because you just don't want to have 3rd and short against Akron and not be able to get it. Like, I just think it's inexcusable when you're playing against Akron. I know that they're going to do things and fire different blitzers and have different guys coming from different directions, but it's Ohio State. It's Quinshon Judkins. It's the offensive line for the Buckeyes should be able to generate 2 or 3 yards anytime they want. And it didn't seem that easy. And some of that I think was on Quinshon in the first half because I don't think he saw the field particularly well, where we saw when TreVeyon Henderson had the ball, he did. So maybe that was just a byproduct of that. But there were a lot of little things. And I'm curious from Chip Kelly's perspective, how much of what you did with the offense was what you felt like was the plan coming in? How much of it was just the adjusting to what Akron was doing? How much were you trying to hold back? Because you know that you can win these games pretty easily without showing much, because I didn't see like a whole lot of crazy creativity from the offense. I did see some different run fits and different blocking schemes where we had like the wide receivers pulling around and doing more blocking and stuff like that, which I like, but I didn't see a lot of what I think we have come to expect out of the Chip Kelly run game experience, which would have been a bunch of different looks that we didn't really see.
I think it's a great question, Byrne, because some of the stuff, like even in the red zone, I keep talking over and over about the misdirection and the effective triple option with the RPO stuff that Will Howard was running and Emeka Egbuka was doing during training camp. We didn't see any of that, and you don't have to show it all during Akron. I certainly understand that part, but what is Chip Kelly's philosophy for, I don't know, incorporating the entire playbook? When do you need to unleash it? How much do you need to show here? How much do you want to keep in your back pocket? Like, that clearly was not the entire Ohio State offense. And they scored 52 points in the game. Now 2 touchdowns came on defense. So maybe we can say we would have liked to see more explosiveness or more downfield shots or more creativity. And all that would be true. But I also think that there's an element where Chip Kelly and Ryan Day knew that they didn't have to do all that in week 1, which is also fair. So I think that's the hardest part of trying to evaluate an opener, and why maybe we went into it and saying, well, if you have 3rd and 1, just blow them off the ball. And that's the only part that maybe we could actually analyze. And even to that extent, it is still week 1, putting pads back on again. You haven't played in 9 months, and it's probably not going to be perfect. Like, that's the hard part of talking about this after week 1.
Yeah. And again, to Bill's point, the second half was much better, but it just seems like there was one thing I always feel about Ohio State offensively, and I felt this way in the last few years. So I don't want to say always, because this has really only been a thing in the last few years. I don't see a lot of just intensity from the offense. I don't see a lot of dudes who are just like, they don't seem to have a lot of like energy. Am I wrong? Do I not see it? Do they just sort of ho-hum their way back to the huddle and mill around? And I just don't really. I watched the USC LSU game on Sunday night, for example, and then you see offenses that are just like, it seems like they're sprinting, and it seems like they're moving way faster than Ohio State's does, and I don't know why.
Probably because they were playing USC and LSU, right? You have more juice in those games, I think.
I agree. That's probably part of it.
I don't disagree with your general assessment of the last couple of years of the offense at times not having enough juice. Like Brandon Ennis said that when we talked to the receivers a couple weeks ago. He said, I would get angry sometimes watching our offense just like not playing with enough passion. I think Will Howard is a guy that can bring that out of the offense, though. He seems to play with a little bit of juice. He was like smiling at defenders and stuff when he was like lining up on the line of scrimmage before a play, and his little point on the first down run after the scramble. Like I think he will. If the offense needs a kick in the butt that way, I think Will's a guy that will give it to him.
I think it only, at least on Saturday, if we're only talking about Ohio State and Akron for the opener, it just paled in comparison to the energy that the defense played with. Like, the exuberance and passion that Lathan Ransom had, I don't think was matched by many guys in the offense. I'm not saying that none of them played with that. Like TreVeyon Henderson putting somebody underground with a blitz pickup and then smiling about it was pretty encouraging.
And screaming so loud you could hear it on TV.
Yeah, like, to say that nobody was playing with that juice, I think would be wrong. If we're just going, head to head, offense versus defense, the defense had more of that. And if that's your point, Byrne, like, you want to see the offense do that more consistently and establish themselves. Like, I don't think that that's off base. I don't think that they don't have that. I think that Will Howard is probably more equipped to do that maybe than Kyle McCord was a year ago. We'll see. We've only had one game to really evaluate, but like, you know that Emeka will do that. You know that he will get vocal. You know for sure that Travion's going to do that. You know that Josh Fryer is a pretty passionate leader, but we're still learning what that means for the rest of the offensive line. And if Quinshawn has that to him, if Jeremiah Smith, we talked about him being like really silent and letting his game speak for himself. Like if you want to see more of that outwardly vocal passion, maybe we'll see that in coming weeks and just not against Akron. I really don't know.
Maybe. And again, I don't want to compare the offense to the defense. The defense, though, what I'm trying to say is like when you watch them, they play like we're the baddest dudes on the field, and you need to recognize that. And they make sure that their opponent knows it. And I don't know that the offense has that vibe about it. And I'm not saying I want guys to like do what the LSU receiver did to USC by any stretch. That a little much.
I kind of do.
Just a little shankability.
Yeah, I just want to see this team remind people that they're the better team. And some, we've seen Ohio State in the last few years get some dumb penalties, some, unsportsmanlike. It's like, I'm not saying I want all that. I want this team to just be reminding people from the first play of the game, we're going to kill you in the nicest possible way.
Oh, so you do want
light about it. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, like
headshots.
I just don't know why it doesn't feel that way. Like I'm watching them. Like, come on, like let's move faster. Get a little oomph, little giddy up. You know what I mean?
Little hitch in the giddy up.
No, they have a hitch in the giddy up. I want less hitches.
He wants less hitch.
Got it. Just straight.
I'm tired of the hitch in the giddy up. I want a full giddy up.
So, if I can assume that a lot of this offensive line conversation and energy is going to be Chip Kelly, maybe stuff. Where would we go with Ryan Day, Bill?
Oh, I actually have another thing I would like to ask all three of them, because I just think me being wrong about something in the offseason, or maybe it's Will Howard changing something. I don't know, but he had 19 scramble yards in that game. I think maybe 2 plays where he kind of got loose. But that's like half of his scramble production from Kansas State last year. It just wasn't something he did a whole lot of. Yes, on designed runs, but not so much like making a guy or slipping a tackle in the backfield, planting his foot and like getting some yards the way we saw him do a couple of times against Akron. And there were times in the offseason where Ryan Day would talk about implementing more quarterback run, and somebody would say like, oh, like CJ against Georgia, right? And he would say yes. And in my head, I was like, well, no, that's not what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of more like JT Barrett kind of quarterback run stuff, not scrambling stuff like CJ was doing, because Will hasn't really done that much. But I don't know if it's them coaching him up to do it more, or some of the physical transformation that he made in the offseason, where he seems to have been or gotten himself a little more twitchier and I think a little quicker in those situations. But like his scrambling all of a sudden is something that I'm viewing as a weapon that I did not necessarily think would be a part of this offense. So I think that's a question that Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, and certainly Will Howard could answer, because if your quarterback's going to do that for you, it just changes a whole lot. Like it makes you right a lot of the time. Ohio State didn't allow a sack. There wasn't a ton of pressure, but the few times that there was pressure, Will Howard just kind of stepped out of sacks, right? And if you're going to start doing that stuff, then it's like, okay, I already thought pretty highly of this offense, but now I think a little higher about it, or a little more highly about it, I guess, because that's just not something Ohio State's had on a regular basis, basically since Justin Fields left. And even Justin Fields, who was incredibly athletic, like didn't know how to protect himself at times when he did that kind of stuff. So I'm just now interested in that part of Will Howard's game and how it gets implemented into the offense.
Yeah, and Justin liked to hold on to the ball. I mean, that was Justin's thing. He'd get sacks because he'd hold on to the ball too long and wouldn't leave the pocket. Where Will, you saw he looked pretty comfortable moving around. It's nice to be validated. Like that's what everyone said his strength was, right? The ability to feel pressure and move around. But now to see him feel pressure, move around, and take off, like that's a difference maker.
Yeah.
I mean, Akron was able to generate, I don't know the exact number. I would say there were 3 plays for sure where they could have got sacks on Will Howard, and he shook off one defender. He stepped into the pocket for another. He extended a play. I think it was the 3rd and 4 to Jeremiah Smith. there were at least 3 plays where I thought like his legs and his poise in the pocket extended a play in a way that maybe, Bill, to your point, we weren't anticipating. And that's not, they weren't even ones that wound up being scramble yards necessarily, but I thought that was the most notable thing from the opener, because we just, we're seeing this for the first time, and it didn't happen a ton for Ohio State a year ago. And some of the sacks, some of the things that Josh Fryer or Josh Simmons gave up when we talked about it, like the number of pressures were low, but when they did happen, they went for sacks. Like Will Howard was erasing them, I think, on Saturday. And again, it's just Akron, but they're scholarship athletes. They were getting home, and he was discarding them and moving on and getting the football out of his hand. So I thought that was, out of everything I saw on Saturday, maybe the most important thing for Ohio State.
Yeah, he was pressured. I'm just looking at PFF. They have him as being pressured only 3 dropbacks, so it was like 10% of the time. But obviously he wasn't. He was 1 for 2 on those plays, and the other one I guess was a run. But it was the one on the second drive, I think, the 3rd and 10, where he like stepped out of a sack, scrambled, rolled to his right, planted his feet, and ripped one to Jeremiah. I was like, whoa, okay, yeah. I didn't know you had that in your bag, sir, but that looks pretty good.
It was pretty good.
Yeah. For me, I mean, the Will Howard conversation is watching the game live. You weren't sure, like, was he as good as you thought he was going to be in this game? And after I've rewatched it, I thought he played much better than I thought at first blush. And I would like to know Ryan Day's second watch of that game and where him and Will see the biggest opportunities to improve. But I thought, like, the timing of him in the passing game was really good. I thought he threw the ball pretty well. Thought he made good decisions. There was one play, obviously the throwback to Travion Henderson, which was an embarrassing decision. But there was one other play, I think, where he extended a play. This was Ohio State ended up, I don't know if this was the one where they went for it on 4th down and didn't get it, or the field goal. But he broke free a little bit of the pocket, and he had Jeremiah Smith one-on-one in the corner of the end zone, the front corner, and he threw it out of bounds instead of trying to make it a catchable ball for Jeremiah. And I wonder if he'd like that one back. But other than that, I think he played a pretty mistake-free game. And again, there's always going to be these conversations and comparisons to a year ago with Kyle McCord. I just think that Will Howard is going to be the type of player who is not going to lose a game for Ohio State. And that if that's what it comes down to at quarterback, then because of what you have with the rest of the roster and the rest of the lineup, then like that's plenty good. But I also think he's capable of winning games for Ohio State the way he played on Saturday and where that's going.
Yep. I don't know that we talked a ton in the postgame about that decision that Will Howard made right before halftime and the throwback to Travion Henderson. Like both Ryan Day and Will Howard brought it up pretty much unprompted. A couple days removed, I'm curious what they'll say about it, because if there was a knock on, the worst decisions that Kyle McCord made a year ago were something like that. And Will Howard can't do that again. And I wonder what he already thinks about that. Watched it on film, his reaction to it. He already knew in real time that can't happen. But now he was really impressive in the post-game press conference talking about the entirety of the game. But now this is the first time with like a Tuesday with Will Howard looking back at the film, where he played, what he did well, and then now what do you think about this one? Like, how do you make sure that doesn't happen again? Because that's the mistake that Ohio State can't afford. When we talk about him not needing to be a superhero, that can be true, but you cannot let something like that occur in games that matter.
Imagine how much would be talking about that play and how often it'd be on television if he just got at the Travion and Travion got like 14 yards out of it. It's like I understand why he did it, because it actually did look like there was some space there. Like, why take the sack if you don't have to? But yeah, a guy who's played as much football as Will Howard should probably just cut his losses there and live for the next play.
Yeah, I think was it like right before halftime against Wisconsin last year where we're like, it wasn't even always just a quarterback decision. Sometimes it was the play calling. Like, does Ryan Day need to do that? Does Chip Kelly have to do that? Like, if you are back on your 25, can you just get to the locker room? I don't know what the right approach is every time. You want to try and score if you're Ohio State and you're playing Akron. I get all that, but you can't force it in situations where it doesn't exist. Like, that's the stuff that costs you.
But they are situational moments, and that's a 2-minute drill. It's 75 yards to go. You have time out. Like, you have to rep those things. I just think that you saw a guy who probably was feeling himself a little bit like, hey, I'm playing against Akron. I play for Ohio State. I can do things. And just decided in that moment, like, don't do that. Don't do that thing. Like, it's okay to take a 4-yard loss. It's not okay to throw a ball in the backfield that would have been picked up and run for a touchdown if Travion wasn't, able to jump on it.
Yeah. Bill, it's a little bit unfortunate the way that it lines up with the coordinator rotation that we do not get Jim Knowles later on today in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, because I think coming out of the opener, there's a lot to discuss with him. And I don't know to what extent Ryan Day is going to dive into the defense, even though he is now the CEO and the head of the program.
Mm-hmm.
Like talking about Sonny Styles playing Mike linebacker with no real experience there, or getting Cody back, how much that impacted or didn't impact some of the stuff that wasn't perfect for Ohio State's defense. Again, they gave up 6 points. They played really good. They scored 2 defensive touchdowns. Not nitpicking, but comparing it to their ceiling, I wonder what Jim Knowles made of that, especially at linebacker.
Yeah, I think linebacker is the key spot, right? I don't think I'm alone in thinking that CJ Hicks did not have a tremendous game starting at will linebacker. It felt like even at times that Akron was kind of picking on him, and like I thought Arvell Reese looked really good. So I'm wondering maybe how fluid that is. And it's not. I'm not trying to write off CJ Hicks after one game and like his first really meaningful action, or at least like that much action in one game. So he certainly can get better. He's incredibly athletic. Maybe he gets his feet under him and learns the speed of the game a little more by playing more consistently, that then better things will come. But it certainly jumped out to me that Arvell Reese, in a very similar situation, in fact, being probably a little worse off experience-wise, didn't seem to suffer from some of the same issues. So it's just looking to me like Arvell is a guy who's going to keep knocking on the door, and then you get Cody back, and then it's like, okay, how many guys can you actually play? And maybe the answer is 4. I think that's fine, but it's a little bit of or there's more potential maybe for movement there than perhaps I was anticipating coming into the year. So I think a full evaluation of that position would be worthwhile, but I'm wondering specifically about CJ Hicks, how they thought he played, and what they think of him kind of moving forward now.
It's definitely going to be a situation where people look at that film, and Sonny Styles, I think, had an up and down game playing, making the first move from safety to linebacker, then all of a sudden having to shift and play Mike and be the guy calling, signals and all that stuff is a big transition. But he was up and down, but I thought for the most part, he acquitted himself fine. Obviously, Arvell Reese played pretty well. And then you have Gabe Powers come in the game and get a pick 6. And there's just guys who have natural instincts at linebacker and seem to know where a play is going. And it does look like CJ struggles with that. I mean, when he's out there and the goal is CJ, go get the quarterback, like he's going to have a role on this team, but I think it's probably maybe going to be more specialized than anybody would have liked 2 months ago, just based on what we saw. He just at times just looks out of place. And when you then directly compare him to the way Arvell Reese looked, who has not played linebacker at Ohio State in a game prior to Saturday, like it is pretty glaring, I think, to see that the difference.
Yeah, we'll see how much Ryan Day talks about that and who graded out champion, not champion on defense. My understanding is that Sonny Styles did in his first game at Mike, which is not somewhere he'd been working for the last 8 months. So after that transition from safety down there, that would be pretty remarkable. Hopefully we get some insight on that from Ryan Day later on in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. We'll have that streamed on the podcast. Things are a little bit unusual with the schedule. Obviously, we weren't at Roosters for Labor Day. We will be in there after we go to the Woody Hayes Athletic Center to hear from Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, and Will Howard. So we'll have that later on Tuesday. We'll have some snap judgments, and then Kings of the North will be going on as well. So a lot to break down as the week 1 is in the books, not just at Ohio State, but around the country as well. So much to discuss, and it's going to be a busy Tuesday for us. We're going to have a lot more content coming your way on the podcast. Thanks for joining us, though, for the daily, the Talkin' Tuesday. It's Bill Landis, it's Jeremy Birmingham, and it's me, Austin Ward. We'll see y'all later.